So the next thing I want to talk about is a whole discontinuity in a rational function. It's one of the things that when you're graphing these functions on worksheets that your teacher may give you, it's one of the things that they typically ask for. And what they're looking for is a coordinate. They're looking for an x and a y value. So I'll show you how to find that. The first thing you do in order to find a whole discontinuity is you're just going to factor whatever you can in both the top and the bottom of the fraction. So in this case, I can factor the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. X plus 1 remains the same on the top. And then the bottom factors into x plus 3 times x plus 1. So I already know from the vertical asymptote video that my two x plus 1 factors will cancel out. So it just so happens that the x value that makes the factor that cancels equal to 0 is the x value of the hole in the graph. So what I mean by that is I can set the x plus 1, the canceling factor, equal to 0, and I'm going to solve for x. That becomes the x coordinate of my hole. In order to find the y coordinate of the hole, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out these factors, and then I'm going to plug in that -1 into whatever is left over. So this is the simplified form of my original equation. Now I'm going to plug in the x coordinate of my hole into x, and I'm going to solve for y. So this is equivalent to 1 over 2. So my y coordinate is 1/2. So I can go to my graph, and I can plug that in. So just about there, I have a whole discontinuity. Okay, so now I can go through and do the rest of the graph if I want to, just to see how this lines up. So I already know from comparing the degree of the top to the degree of the bottom that my horizontal asymptote is going to be equivalent to the vertical shift. That's because the degree of the top is less than that of the bottom. So my horizontal asymptote, in this case, is equal to my vertical shift. Because there's no value added or subtracted outside of the fraction, my horizontal asymptote is just 0. So I'm going to change colors here so it's a little easier to see. So this is my horizontal asymptote. And now the vertical asymptote. In order to find that, I take the factored form of my equation, and I take the bottom of the fraction, I set it equal to 0, and I solve for x. So my vertical asymptote is x equals -3. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. That's what that looks like. And then if I was to choose a few test points, I'd find out that my graph ends up looking a little bit like this. So those are all of the steps in finding how to graph a rational function. We have both the horizontal asymptote right here, I have the vertical asymptote, and I have my whole discontinuities.